response. Is Senator Sanders with us? Oh. Oh, great. Bernie might be arriving any moment now.
No, I am here.
Aha, Senator.
Hey, Tom. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great.
So, what's on your mind today? Do you want
Well, my apologies. My apologies for getting in late. I'm the ranking member of the Budget Committee, and we just had an interesting hearing on the debt and ideas on how we go forward. And one of the things that I did in my remarks was to remind my Republican colleagues that one of the reasons that we have as large a deficit and debt as we have today is the fact that under President Bush we went into war in Iraq and Afghanistan, but somehow the deficit hawks forgot to pay for it. We gave huge tax breaks to some of the wealthiest people in this country, and it didn't pay for that. And we passed a Medicare Part D prescription drug program written by the insurance companies that forgot to allow us to negotiate prices for prescription drugs, and also not paid for. So what I worry about very much in terms of the Budget Committee is that within a couple of weeks, you're going to see a Republican budget which will say, in order to balance the budget in 10 years, let's make drastic cuts in Medicare, Medicaid, nutrition programs, food stamps, education, affordable housing, that virtually any program that impacts the lives of working families in this country will be cut, while at the same time their idea for dealing with the deficit is to give more tax breaks to the rich and large corporations. So, and in addition to that, I fear very much attacks on Social Security and their desire to cut Social Security. Yeah. So that's kind of what we went over at the hearing.
Remarkable. Let me just insert here, Senator Sanders will be with us until the top of the hour for the next 25 minutes. And so if you have questions for the senator, give us a call. We have a couple of open lines right now, and Danielle's going through and trying to clean up a few more. And so we can do our Brunch with Bernie hour, which we're not going to have this Friday. We're having it right now. Brunch with Bernie live on Wednesday. We are live and on the air, so please call in if you have a question for the senator. What else have you observed over the last, it's been over a week since we talked.
Yeah, it has. I think as many listeners know, the president vetoed the Keystone Pipeline legislation, and I think he was absolutely right, and I will do my best to make sure that we have the votes to sustain that veto. The issue here is that at a time when climate change is real, it is already causing devastating problems, and it is of human origin. I think the last thing in the world we want to do is to encourage the production and transportation of some of the dirtiest oil on the planet, which is the tar sands. So I'm glad the president vetoed that. I think in terms of Homeland Security, what we're dealing with now is once again Republican brinksmanship, and instead of saying that at a time when ISIS is perpetrating horrendous terrorist attacks around the world that we saw recently in Paris or in Denmark, and the threats of other attacks, the idea of shutting down Homeland Security is literally beyond comprehension. But what the Republicans are saying, and what they passed in the House, is that they want to repeal Obama's efforts in immigration. Right. And the only way they will pass Homeland Security is to include that language. And I think that that is absolutely wrong. I think we need what we call a clean bill, fund Homeland Security, let our people continue to do the work to protect the security of the United States.
Amen. We have questions for you if you'd like to pick them up, or do you want to?
No, let's do it.
Okay,
let's do it.
Cool. Denise in Calumet, Michigan. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Senator Sanders, this is an honor. I'm worried about these legislators that are touting these 39-hour work weeks. It's happening up here in Michigan. Dan Banashek's in the 1st District up here. He's a Republican. They're making it sound like, oh, you can have your hours back. You can have 39 hours a week. The only thing is that with that comes one less hour of work a week for your normal 40-hour work week, but no insurance, no benefits. And That's like in the fine tuning. How can people fight this?
Well, Denise, you're right to be very concerned about that. I think when we talk about the disappearing middle class and the fact that millions of people are working longer hours for low wages, that people just don't have the disposable income to buy health care, the kinds of insurance that they need, or to send their kids to college, or to take care of other basic needs, that has a lot to do with what you're describing. And that is, there is an attack on workers all over this country, and this is just another attack. What a weird idea. We're going to hire you for 39 hours, maybe 39 hours and 59 minutes, but we're not going to hire you for 40 hours. Why? Well, we know why. And the answer is, as Denise indicated, that's a way for employers to avoid providing health insurance. So I think at the grassroots level, we have to mobilize to oppose that plan. Longer term, Denise, we have got to do what every other major country on earth does, and that is say that health care is a right of all people, not tied to employment. And that's why I believe in a Medicare for All single-payer program.
Tim in Ann Arbor, Michigan. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Jeff, hi. This is
Hi, Tim.
Senator Sanders. Honor to talk to you. My question, I read Robert Wright's article. He wrote one about a week ago where he said that Obama needs to not only veto Keystone XL pipeline, but he needs to permanently, cut it off. And obviously we know he's vetoed it, but now what would be the mechanism? I didn't understand that the president would have the power to do that, to be able to just cut off Keystone permanently. Do you have any idea on that?
Well, what the president did is veto it, and he thinks that the entire regulatory process has not been completed and that it's premature to give the green light to go ahead on the project. My own view is that we know enough to kill this project for good. And what we know is that it makes no sense for the United States of America to be encouraging the production of this very dirty oil when we have got to be moving in exactly the opposite direction, and that is cutting our consumption of fossil fuel and moving toward energy efficiency and sustainable energy. So I think we know enough. The president basically is saying we don't, so at this point he's going to veto it. But I should think that for the foreseeable future, you're not going to see the Keystone Pipeline built.
Wes in Cripple Creek, Colorado. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Senator Sanders, what is the chances of eliminating or banking in some way without Wall Street banks? In other words, trying to cut down outrageous loans, not loans, but interest rates on credit cards and things of that type.
Wes, thank you very much for asking that question, because this is an issue we have been involved in for a number of years. It's a two-part question. I think you're asking about high interest rates on credit cards, and you're asking about Wall Street in general. Wall Street today, as I understand it, issues about 2/3 of the credit cards in this country. That's perhaps the 6th largest financial institutions that do that. And as I think Wes is indicating, interest rates on some of those cards are just off the charts at a time when the Fed interest rates are extraordinarily low. And what you're seeing is, once again, Wall Street ripping off low and moderate income people who go into debt on their credit cards, basically because they don't have a whole lot of money. So I think what you do, Wes, and we have proposed this idea years ago, is you bring back usury law. You know, if you look at any major religion on earth, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Islam, usury is against the law. We used to have laws like that. I would bring that back, prohibiting companies from charging outrageous high prices on interest.
Senator Bernie Sanders with us. We'll be back with more of your calls for Senator Sanders in our Wednesday Brunch with Bernie right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And be sure to check out Bernie's website at sanders.senate.gov. You can sign up for the Bernie Buzz, his newsletter. You can hop over to Facebook, too. He's got a great site there. Welcome back. Robert in Santa Maria, California. You are on the air with Senator Sanders. Thanks for watching Free Speech on TV on Dish Network. Robert.
Good morning, Bernie. I think we've only got one shot to get control of this country, and that is we're going to need all the independents, which we outnumber the Democrats and the Republicans, as you know. If we can get the independents to unite, you'd need some congressmen and you'd need some. Otherwise, you'd be stuck like Obama. If with you as the head of the party, I do believe we can take this country back. We don't have to worry about the money. Each person's got one vote. Well, there's a whole lot of people who are independents, and we're dying to take this place back.
Senator?
Well, Robert, let me just say a couple of things. Number one, I think you're right. You're correct. More people today are independents than Democrats or Republicans because of very deep dissatisfaction with what's going on in the two-party system. As I think most people appreciate, the middle class continues to decline. We have more people living in poverty than almost any time in the history of our country, and yet the very wealthiest people and large corporations are doing phenomenally well. We have seen since 1983, just a huge transfer of wealth, many, many trillions of dollars going from the middle class to the top 0.1%. And as Robert indicates, people are angry and they're frustrated and they want change. Where I don't agree with you, Robert, is suggesting that money in politics does not matter. It matters very profoundly. We are looking at the Koch brothers alone, the second wealthiest family in America, an extreme right-wing family that wants to eliminate Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, education, federal aid to education, etc. These guys are prepared to spend almost $1 trillion in the next election. Not just them and a few of their friends. Billions, I'm sorry. Close to $1 billion. So what I have to do is, as I think about presidential politics, is two things. To think about, can we run a strong campaign, a winning campaign? Can you raise the money that you need? And, that's what we're wrestling with. And number two, how do you bring together that strong grassroots movement? It's one thing to say that people are dissatisfied. They are. It's another thing to say that people are prepared to be politically active. That's another thing. And that's what we're looking at. But I thank you, Robert, very much for your support.
Let's see here. Michael, watching Free Speech TV in Smithfield, North Carolina. Just a minute to the break, Michael. A quick question, please.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Again, and it's an honor to speak to you, Mr. Sanders and Thom Hartmann. Mr. Sanders, I have a question. Quick question. Does the Republican majority have the votes to override a Keystone Pipeline veto by President Obama?
Michael, my belief is they do not have those votes. I'm pretty sure that you never know. But I do not think they're going to have the 67 votes that they need to override that veto.
Yeah, it's 60 to overcome a filibuster and 67 to override a veto, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty substantial stuff. Very substantial stuff. We'll be right back. Senator Bernie Sanders is with us. He's in the Senate recording studio. We'll be right back with more of Brunch with Bernie on Wednesday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. On Friday, I'll be up in Minneapolis, by the way, at KTNF. We're doing the Blue State Ball. I'll tell you more about that as we continue through the program. We'll be right back with more of your questions for Bernie right after this. 10 minutes before the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Senator Bernie Sanders on the line with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie a couple of days early. It's on Wednesday. And Dennis in Madison, Wisconsin. You're on the air with Senator Sanders. Thanks for listening to the mic.
Thank you. Mr. Sanders, I wanted to know if it's possible to get an assessment on the exact cost of the pipeline, and then if we were to take that money and divert that into, or change that into using it for renewable energy like hydropower. I understand there's a gentleman in Florida that developed a way of harnessing the power of or streams to produce a tremendous amount of electricity. And have they thought about doing something like that?
Well, Dennis, I absolutely agree with you that the country has got to move aggressively to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. You gave one example of how we can move: wind, solar, geothermal. There are many other areas, and that's an exploding area of research. How do we break our dependence on fossil fuel and move toward sustainable energy? Then I agree with you. But in terms of the Keystone, it's not a question of the United States government spending money on that project and then using it for something else. That is private money, primarily from a Canadian oil company. And what our job is to give the approval to the project, or not to pay for it, per se. So, yes, we have got to transform our energy system, and when we do that, we can create a significant number of decent-paying jobs. But it is not a question of taking money from Keystone, which is private money and not government money.
Linda in Deerfield Beach, Florida. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Senator, for taking my call. My question, I'll make it real quick, and I'll take your answer off the air. How long is the agreement for the pre-funding go to? And are we doing everything we can to stop the closing of those plants?
You're talking about the U.S. Postal Service, right, Linda?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
poison pill pre-funding. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is an issue, Linda, I have worked very hard on, and I am very distressed at where we are right now. I think the Republican plan is in operation, and what you're seeing today is slower mail delivery standards, which will discourage, I think, businesses and people from using the Postal Service. Very bad. We're working hard, and we have worked hard against just very difficult odds here. My understanding is that the Postal Service plans on shutting down about 82 processing plants. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, in April, I believe, is when they're going to start that process. And we are working with the postal unions to try to prevent that from happening. That will mean shrinking the workforce of the Postal Service by some 15,000 workers, but just solidify lowest delivery standards. And I think that's exactly the wrong way to go.
Senator, isn't this one of those places? We had an earlier caller who was asking about, is there an alternative to the Wall Street banks? And I think was asking about public banking. Isn't this an opportunity for the post office?
Absolutely. I mean, there are, but the first point, and I'm sorry, and Linda also asked about this prepayment business.
Right.
What most people perceive is that the Postal Service already has enough money in that fund that you don't have to continue to raise $5.5 billion a year. Without that $5.5 billion prepayment for future health care for retirees, the Postal Service is actually making an operating budget. That is what is hurting them. You get rid of that, they're making money. And then you give them the latitude and the flexibility to expand their business model, including, in my view, banking for lower income people who want a place to put some deposits, who want a checking account. I think if you do that, it'll not only help a lot of people stay away from the outrageous interest rates at payday lenders, it will also create revenue for the Postal Service. But there are a number of opportunities for the Postal Service to increase their revenue and serve the public.
Kathy in Madison, Wisconsin. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Who is it? Who did you say?
Kathy, listening on 92.1 FM in Madison.
Yes, sorry. I sneezed. No, sorry. Senator Sanders, I'm just wondering, I don't want to be specific, but if a U.S. Senator, and I'm saying the Senate because you know that, if a U.S. Senator crossed the line as far as interference with U.S. foreign policy, say, for example, that they may have encouraged money to be put into an army that ended up being ISIS, and or that they may have chastised the head of a foreign government for saying that they shouldn't be talking about making peace. Is there ever a point when a person would cross the line and then should be held by someone, the Senate itself, or some other body?
See, under very, very rare circumstances, and it has not happened since I've been in the Senate for over 8 years, senators are censured. Senator Joseph McCarthy was censured for his witch hunts and his reckless activities. It happens very rarely, and I think, right now, in terms of foreign policy, in terms of our approach toward the Middle East, there are strong differences of opinion. I think, sadly, I have some colleagues here who want to continue what appears to me to be an almost never-ending war in the Middle East, send more troops on the ground against ISIS. I think that's a bad idea. I think what has to happen is that the countries in the Middle East themselves, led by Saudi Arabia, which, by the way, has the third largest military budget in the world, these troops in Qatar and Kuwait and Iraq, of course, and Jordan, they are going to have to get their troops on the ground to defeat this terrible organization called ISIS. The United States should be supportive, but I don't think we should be leading that effort. I don't think that is good policy.
Yeah. Senator, you just hit the post. We just ran out of time for the hour. Thank you so much for being with us today.
All right, my pleasure. Thank you, Tom.
And keep up the great work.
And I'm sorry I was late.
Oh no, it is such a pleasure to have you. No apologies necessary. Thank you, sir. We'll be back. John Dean actually is going to drop by in the next hour. Stick around.